Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. I keep replaying the events in my mind. It's a continuous loop of images, like a reel on an old projector. I stood in an aging casino on Fremont Street, eyes drifting across blinking lights and swirling carpets, as if it were any other day. The dream of hitting something big felt more distant than the far end of the strip. My background was unremarkable. 39 years old, divorced twice, originally from Cincinnati, Ohio. I spent the last few years in Vegas working a maintenance job at a hotel, but rarely stuck with anything for too long. I'd landed in this city with big ideas, yet I was living small, same as ever. That particular evening, I was testing my luck at a place called the Golden Oasis on Fremont. It was a modest property, built in the 60s, renovated sometime in the 90s. Nothing glitzy like the big resorts on Las Vegas Boulevard. Folks on tight budgets favored the Golden Oasis, and I fit the demographic. The neon sign outside had half its bulbs out, and the place always smelled faintly of stale coffee. I wasn't expecting a miracle, just escaping reality for a few hours with a tattered wallet and the last of my paycheck. The gambling floor was quieter than usual. A pair of older couples nursed their drinks near the roulette tables, and a lone tourist fiddled with a slot machine in the corner. An electronic tune played overhead, repeating the same jingle every few minutes. Just as I slid a few dollars into an upright slot machine near the cashier's cage, a flicker passed over the lights. Nobody seemed to pay it much attention. Sometimes the power in older Fremont buildings does that. I finished my lukewarm soda and aimed for one more spin. That's when the machine lit up like a holiday parade. Numbers danced across the screen, accompanied by an electronic fanfare that pierced the general hush on the floor. One by one, the reels aligned in a pattern I'd only seen in promotional posters, a perfect string of matching symbols. The total displayed at the bottom soared beyond anything I'd ever witnessed personally, $250,000. I stood there uncertain, a bit like an actor who forgot his lines. An attendant was supposed to sprint over, shaking my hand, maybe offer me a round of applause. Instead, a pair of security guards hurried past, stepping over a fallen chair near a craps table. My jackpot tune continued blaring. The few patrons nearby glanced at me, but most of them seemed more worried about something else. People were whispering, checking their phones. A tired pit boss with lines across her forehead spoke anxiously into a radio. I should have been ecstatic. It was a small fortune for someone like me. The slot machine kept chiming, letting everyone know I had just accomplished something that almost never happens. In most circumstances, I would have jumped around or at least grinned wide enough to split my face. But a different energy took hold in the Golden Oasis at that moment. The security guards disappeared in the direction of the hotel lobby, and a voice on the PA system crackled. I only caught fragments. "Attention, please. Immediate. Remain calm." The message cut in and out, as if the system were malfunctioning. Curiosity replaced excitement. I stepped back from my slot machine, still hearing it ring behind me. That's when I noticed the bellhop, who looked younger than me by at least a decade. He wore a slightly too large uniform jacket, the name Anderson embroidered on the left side. He seemed flustered, scanning the floor. He spotted me and spoke in a quick, hushed tone. "Sir, you might want to consider leaving right now." He threw a nervous glance toward the main entrance. I hadn't even collected my voucher or signed anything yet, so I stammered something about my winnings. Anderson shook his head and handed me a paper slip from the slot machine's printer. "Here, if you want to survive, hold on to that, but trust me when I say we need to get moving." His urgency was contagious. If an employee was telling me to run, it had to be serious. Something about the tension in the air told me this wasn't just a minor scuffle or a bachelorette party gone wrong. I noticed at least 2 people in the corner near the bar, seated oddly on the floor, as if they'd collapsed. A staff member hovered over them, face white as a sheet, trying to figure out what was happening. I took the slip from him, the readout showing $250,000. It didn't even feel real, but I tucked it carefully into my pocket, zipping it up. The money might change everything, if I made it out. If. Anderson pulled me in the direction of a side hallway that led behind the casino floor. Usually, it was off limits to guests. The worn sign on the wall said staff only. Another sign indicated maintenance rooms, laundry, and a route to the employee cafeteria. We slipped through a narrow door and entered a corridor with flickering fluorescent bulbs. Cardboard boxes and cleaning carts lined the path. The soft hum of a distant ventilation system filled the air. No crowds back here, just the two of us. "Something's happening in the city," he murmured. "I heard on the radio there's a serious issue with some kind of sickness. People at the other casinos, they're running or going into lockdown. We haven't gotten an official order to evacuate, but the management is telling staff to get out if we can." I tried to gather more info. "A sickness, like an outbreak?" He nodded, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. "We keep hearing the word infection. Some guests collapsed in the lobby. Others are running around scaring people, like they're in some kind of frenzy." He looked away. "I saw a person in the hallway on the 15th floor. They lost it. Security tried to restrain them. Then the radio went dead." My mind raced through worst-case scenarios. By then, rumors of strange diseases occasionally circulated online, but I'd never witnessed anything serious in person. I pictured the local news, with sensational headlines about some new virus from across the ocean. I didn't want to believe it was happening in the city that never truly sleeps. Anderson continued leading me through the corridor. We passed a break room with a flickering TV. The screen displayed the local news channel, 8 News Now, with a scrolling banner that read, "Reports of violent incidents across downtown. Viewers advised to remain indoors and await official instructions." That was the first time I recognized we might be on the brink of something citywide. I recalled stories about major quarantines in other countries. Never thought I'd see something like that in southern Nevada. Eventually, we reached a service elevator near a locked door. Anderson fished out a small keycard from his pocket. "This leads up to the staff rooftop access," he explained. "Management sometimes uses it to bring up supplies for big events or to show VIPs the skyline. No one uses it much, and it might be an escape route if ground-level exits are blocked." He scanned the card on the elevator's control pad. The doors rattled open. Inside, a single overhead light flickered, reflecting off brushed steel walls. The capacity sign read, "Maximum 12 persons," though it looked barely big enough for 4. We stepped in. He tapped the top floor. Then a jolt coursed through the cabin, and the door slid shut. The elevator began its climb, accompanied by the faint whir of gears. Anderson tried to radio someone, but all he got was static. In the silence, my thoughts drifted to what might be happening outside. I envisioned the iconic Fremont Street canopy, normally sparkling with LED shows and crowds. Could it be deserted or overrun by frightened tourists? Halfway up, the elevator jerked. The panel lights flickered, then the carriage rattled, stopping between floors. Anderson pressed the button again, but there was no response. We both exchanged glances. Without stating it out loud, we understood we were stuck. He tried the emergency phone, but it let out a flat tone. No connection. He pried open a small panel, revealing the overhead escape hatch. The hatch was sealed from above, and without the proper tool, we couldn't force it. Meanwhile, muffled sounds drifted in through the elevator doors, shouting, faint echoes of footsteps. Something was happening on the floor outside, though we couldn't see which one. Anderson fumbled for his radio once more, pressing the side button. "If anyone's there, this is Bill Anderson, staff at the Golden Oasis. We're stuck in the service elevator, near the top floors. Anyone read?" Static, then a faint hiss. We stood there under that flickering light, not sure how long we had. My mind cycled to the slip of paper in my pocket. Incredible that just minutes ago, I'd been a jackpot winner. Now I was jammed in an elevator, uncertain if I'd even get the chance to spend it. An uneasy silence passed. The overhead light dimmed further, threatening to plunge us into darkness, when a slight hum returned, and the elevator lurched upward. We resumed movement at a snail's pace. Neither of us said anything until the doors finally opened on the 18th floor, an unfinished level with exposed beams and plastic sheeting along the walls. The plan had been to go to the roof, but apparently the elevator decided this was as far as it could go. Exiting into the dim corridor, we discovered old supplies stacked haphazardly, boxes labeled linens, scaffolding equipment, and large spools of cable. A single emergency bulb cast a weak glow. Somewhere in the distance, the building groaned. The sounds from below were distant but unsettling, sporadic shouting, scraping, and the occasional crash. Anderson picked his way forward. "There's a stairwell on the other side that goes up to the roof. If we can reach that, maybe there's still a chance for a rescue." I heard a rumor that some authorities are directing helicopters to pick up VIPs from rooftops, but I haven't confirmed. We navigated around the clutter. A tall window at the end of the hall looked out over downtown Las Vegas. Even from up here, the usual neon glow seemed dimmer than normal. The famed Fremont Street Experience canopy was off. I could see a column of dark smoke rising from somewhere near Las Vegas Boulevard. Flashing emergency lights dotted the streets far below. Something in the environment made it clear that events were spiraling quickly. The roads were clogged with vehicles, some of them at odd angles, as if abandoned mid-lane. Police cruisers formed barricades in front of the larger casinos. There was movement among the crowds, but it was too distant to interpret precisely. It reminded me of aerial footage of mass evacuations I'd seen on the news in other places, but never in my own backyard. We found the door labeled "Stair Access," metal with a push bar. Anderson tried it, but it didn't budge. The sign taped across it read, "Under construction, do not enter," as if that would stop us. He glanced at me. I shrugged, figuring there was no turning back. With a combined effort, we forced the door open, the latch screeching in protest. Inside was a dimly lit stairwell, barely illuminated by an emergency fixture on the landing above us. The normal overhead lights were out. Exposed concrete walls and the smell of fresh paint filled the air. In the gloom, we ascended slowly, stepping carefully around bits of debris, chunks of drywall, a stray pipe, scattered nails. The rooftop door was locked from the inside with a heavy-duty padlock. Anderson patted his pockets, searching for anything that could help. He pulled out a small multi-tool, probably standard for staff who needed to open boxes or adjust small fixtures. The lock was not something that could be easily undone without the proper key. We stood there, confronted by cold metal. Anderson let out a low hiss of frustration. "I can't break it with this. Maybe there's another route." He shone a small flashlight around the doorframe, checking for weaknesses. Meanwhile, I walked along the narrow landing, noticing a metal vent near the floor. The vent cover was attached by a few rusted screws. We spent a few minutes investigating. Eventually, it became clear we weren't getting out onto the rooftop that way, not without specialized tools or a lot of noise. That's when we heard it. Movement in the stairwell below. It might have been footsteps, but they sounded uneven, followed by a soft scraping. Could be more staff, or perhaps not. Anderson motioned for me to turn off the flashlight. We backed against the cinder block wall, breathing in the stale air. After a few moments, the sounds receded or moved elsewhere. The tension in that space weighed on us like a physical presence. When it seemed safe, we made our way back down to the 18th floor, gently closing the door behind us. The corridor was still empty, but a shift in the atmosphere suggested we shouldn't linger. The building felt less stable somehow, as if the entire infrastructure was unsettled by the events unfolding. We navigated the cluttered corridor until we found a plastic sheet partition. Sliding it aside, we emerged into what appeared to be an unfinished hotel suite. Wires dangled from the ceiling, and a layer of dust coated the floor. Large windows spanned one side, giving a view of the city. The suite's door to the main hallway was closed but not locked. Opening it a crack, we peeked out. This hallway looked a bit more finished, carpeted, albeit with protective plastic covering the surface. A few fluorescent lights blinked overhead. No immediate sign of chaos. A sign on the wall indicated that guest rooms on this level weren't yet open to the public. Just as we stepped into this newer corridor, my phone vibrated. I fished it out. 1 bar of service, a push notification from the local police department. Emergency alert. Restrain from traveling on major highways due to multiple incidents. Seek shelter if possible. Avoid groups showing signs of aggression. The words read like something out of a late-night horror film. Anderson eyed the notification. Looks like the city's going into full emergency mode. Maybe there's a perimeter or something outside. We pressed on, determined to find a better way down. Our plan: reach a lower floor, exit the building discreetly, and see if we could get out of downtown. That's when we heard voices. 2 staff members wearing golden Oasis uniforms, looking disheveled, stumbled around the corner. They saw us and waved us over. Relief washed over their faces. One introduced himself as Kevin Moore, a security guard. The other was a housekeeping supervisor named Rosalind Brooks. They looked like they'd been through a frazzling experience. Kevin explained they'd just come from a lower floor. According to him, some patrons were behaving erratically, and a few staff members had been harmed trying to contain the situation. He mentioned terms like extreme aggression, biting, and unresponsive to normal restraint. I tried to keep my breathing measured as I listened. They said local authorities were instructing casinos to lock down, but it happened so fast, many places had incomplete security measures. Kevin and Rosalind wanted to reach a service stairwell that led to the parking structure adjacent to the building. If we could cross there, maybe we'd find a vehicle, or at least better access to the streets beyond the police barricades. That plan sounded more concrete than the rooftop attempt. Anderson agreed. We decided to follow them, forming a small group. Moving through the 18th floor, we passed rows of empty rooms. The entire place felt like a deserted construction site. The silence was broken only by distant echoes. Once or twice, we heard faint shuffling in other parts of the floor, but we never encountered anyone else. Eventually, we reached a large set of double doors labeled Utility Authorized Personnel Only. Rosalind swiped a master keycard, and the doors clicked open. Beyond was a narrow corridor with exposed pipes overhead and a concrete floor underfoot. Water dripped from somewhere, forming small puddles. We continued until we reached a metal staircase that angled downward, presumably connecting to lower service levels. Kevin led the way, flashlight in hand. We descended carefully, step by step, scanning for any sign of movement. The deeper we went, the stronger the smell of dampness and stale air. Along the walls, caution signs warned about low clearance or indicated electrical hazard areas. At one landing, we passed a door marked Boiler Room, from which we heard mechanical hissing. Another level down, a sign indicated we were near the basement. That's when it happened. A metallic clang echoed from somewhere below, followed by a quick shuffle of footsteps. Our group paused, pressed against the wall. Kevin, being security, gestured for us to stay behind while he peered around the corner. We inched forward, hugging the corridor's edge. A single overhead light in the next stairwell flickered, revealing a figure leaning against the railing. The person's posture was unnatural, and the angle of their limbs looked uncomfortable, as if they were fighting to remain upright. Kevin called out softly, "Excuse me, are you all right?" No direct response. The figure's head made a subtle movement, but that was it. We approached slowly, a sense of rising apprehension in the group. The figure turned slightly, and the light illuminated part of their face. Eyes unfocused, expression distant. They wore what looked like a portion of a housekeeping uniform, but it was torn. Before Kevin could say another word, the figure lurched in our direction, arms extended. Kevin sprang back, nearly colliding with Rosalind. The figure stumbled forward, nearly losing balance. There was a suspended moment, nobody sure how to react. Then Kevin stepped between us and the figure, trying to reason with them. "We can get you help," he said in a calm tone. The figure continued forward, making a muted, throaty sound. Kevin raised his flashlight, ready to block if necessary. At the last moment, the figure's legs buckled. They crumpled to the floor near Kevin's feet, still reaching out. This was no ordinary collapse. It looked like they had no control over basic motor skills. Rosalind stood behind me, gripping the edge of my jacket. I recall noticing the dust swirling in the stale air, collecting in the light beams from the flickering overhead bulb. Kevin signaled for us to move around the prone individual carefully. Rosalind whispered that we should keep distance, referencing the unknown nature of this illness. Anderson and I followed Kevin's lead, each of us giving a wide berth to the figure on the floor. The person made a few more attempts to reach for us, but their coordination was nearly gone. We managed to navigate past them, continuing down the next flight of stairs, hearts in throats, though I will not describe it that way. It's simply the sense of pressing worry that fueled each quick step. No one spoke. We only heard the faint rasp of Kevin's breath and the creak of the stair treads. At the final landing, we found a heavy metal door labeled "Parking Level Access." That was our target. Kevin swiped the master keycard again. The door clicked. We pushed through and entered a large cement hallway with overhead industrial lighting. It had the typical hush of a parking structure on an off-peak day, except this time we could hear distant commotion. Sirens, raised voices, the hum of engines revving erratically. We pressed forward until we reached the actual parking area. Dozens of cars sat in neat rows, but some were parked haphazardly, as if people had jumped out and run. Several overhead lights were off, leaving large pockets of shadow. Kevin took the lead, scanning between vehicles. A set of double doors on the far side presumably led to a ramp. Beyond that, the street. We aimed in that direction, stepping around abandoned luggage, scattered fast food bags, and broken glass from a shattered rear window. This wasn't how I expected to spend my night after hitting a six-figure jackpot. We turned one corner and came face to face with an alarming scene. A group of 3 individuals near a pillar, knees bent in unnatural positions. Their faces looked pale under the dim overhead light. One was wearing what had once been a bellhop outfit, similar to Anderson's, but it was torn and stained. The group seemed to be fixated on something behind a car. They didn't seem to notice us at first. Kevin motioned for silence. We moved behind an SUV, staying out of sight. Rosalind's phone buzzed and she quickly muted it. We huddled, uncertain of the best path. The main exit ramp was about 30 yards away, but the group stood in a direct line. Were they infected, or just severely unwell? The unpredictability was unsettling. Finally, after some hushed debate, we decided to circle around through a row of cars, out of their line of sight. The sense of unease in the group was palpable, expressed in the tight grip each person had on any available item they could use defensively. I realized I still carried a handle from a broken chair, which I'd picked up earlier on the casino floor without thinking about it. We navigated between dusty sedans and battered trucks. My mind kept drifting to the jackpot ticket in my pocket. A small corner had crumpled slightly, but the printed numbers were still visible. It felt surreal that in the midst of all this, I was clutching the biggest stroke of luck in my entire life. At one point, we heard a loud crash, metal on concrete. The group near the pillar snapped their attention in the direction of the noise. We paused behind an old station wagon, hearts in throats. A tense moment passed, then we slipped away again. Finally, we reached the exit ramp. A heavy security gate was lowered halfway, possibly triggered by an automated system. Just enough clearance for someone to crawl under. Kevin took a quick peek outside, then signaled for us to follow. One at a time, we slid under the gate. Emerging onto a side street behind the Golden Oasis, we saw that dawn was approaching. The pinkish sky revealed more of the city than I wanted to see. Several blocks away, a large plume of dark smoke spiraled skyward. Closer by, at the intersection, a National Guard Humvee blocked traffic, while uniformed personnel directed frantic citizens. People with backpacks and suitcases were making their way on foot, possibly heading toward the freeway. Sirens echoed from multiple directions, and overhead, a helicopter flew in an erratic pattern. A wave of relief hit me at the sight of military presence. Perhaps they had a plan. Kevin conferred with the rest of us about approaching the guard or trying to find an alternate route. The guard post looked swamped with anxious crowds, making it uncertain how we'd be received. Sometimes, in large-scale emergencies, congested checkpoints can become flashpoints of confusion. Anderson recalled a rumor that main roads were jammed, possibly blocked entirely. He suggested we aim for the outskirts, maybe find a less congested path. He mentioned an older route leading toward Boulder Highway or US 95, away from the main strip. I realized I could possibly find a vehicle of my own if we ventured far enough. Of course, that would mean traveling through unfamiliar neighborhoods or risking an even more chaotic situation. Still, it beat standing around, hoping for a rescue that might never come. We made our way east, staying on side streets that paralleled Fremont. Along the way, we witnessed the city's transformation. A few shops had smashed windows, though it wasn't clear if it was from panic or forced entry. We saw a few folks running with supplies in their arms, heading for personal vehicles. Sometimes in the distance, we caught glimpses of individuals with vacant expressions, stumbling aimlessly, reminiscent of the person we saw in the stairwell. Kevin took point, occasionally stopping to help us avoid direct encounters with large groups. Rosalind kept her phone out, trying to glean fresh updates. Now and then, she mumbled about official orders for residents to stay indoors, the introduction of a partial quarantine, and so on. Eventually, we reached a small convenience store with a locked front door. The lights were out, but it appeared mostly intact. We peeked inside through the glass. No movement. We considered searching for supplies, but none of us wanted to risk drawing attention by forcing our way in. Pressing onward, we navigated through a mostly empty intersection. A flickering street lamp buzzed overhead, giving off just enough light to notice the boarded-up windows of a nearby restaurant. Then we spotted it, a battered motorcycle leaning against a curb, its key still in the ignition, possibly abandoned by a fleeing owner. Kevin scanned the immediate area. We saw no sign of the owner or anyone else. Vehicles behind it were double parked or left with doors open. It looked like multiple people had panicked and run off. The small group paused. I moved closer, running a hand over the motorcycle's scratched paint. The manufacturer's logo suggested it was a mid-range model, maybe an older Kawasaki. The gas gauge was a small dial on the console, and it hovered around a quarter tank. Kevin said quietly, "If that runs, one of us can try to scout ahead, or even get out of town." I offered to test it, though my riding experience was minimal. Growing up, I'd driven a friend's dirt bike a few times, but never on a city street. In that moment, the situation left few alternatives. Anderson and Rosalind both pointed out that a single motorcycle wouldn't help us all escape. But if I went ahead, maybe I could find a safer route or come back for them with a car or truck. The group agreed on a short-term plan. I'd check the bike's functionality, see if I could circle a few blocks to scout an approach to US 95 or the highways leading east. Meanwhile, they would watch from a side alley and stay hidden, avoiding confrontation. If I returned within half an hour, we could make a plan for everyone. If not, they'd continue on foot. So I did something I never imagined I'd do in such urgent circumstances. I climbed onto the seat of that dusty motorcycle, scanned the controls, and tried the ignition. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. My pulse quickened, but I stayed silent about it, not wanting to draw unwanted attention. I glanced at Kevin, Anderson, and Rosalind, each giving a subtle nod. I gripped the handlebars, nudged the kickstand up, and gently twisted the throttle. The bike jerked forward, almost causing me to lose balance. After a shaky start, I found enough control to navigate the deserted intersection. Riding through the streets of downtown Las Vegas under those conditions was surreal. The typical neon glow seemed washed out by the morning light. revealing a landscape of confusion and vacant sidewalks. Here and there, I saw small knots of people, some apparently healthy, some clearly not. An emergency vehicle roared past, siren echoing. At one point, I passed a parked city bus with no driver, interior lights still on. I turned onto a stretch leading south, searching for a way onto the freeway. A small sign indicated an on-ramp for I-515 heading toward Henderson. As I approached, I saw a line of vehicles at a standstill, some with people still inside, others abandoned. National Guard vehicles formed a makeshift checkpoint at the top of the ramp. It was clear that method of escape was blocked. I circled around, avoiding that route. The roads leading north were similarly jammed. Eventually, I found a side route that connected to Las Vegas Boulevard well south of the main tourist area, hoping to bypass the worst congestion. By then, the motorcycle's fuel gauge dipped slightly. If I was going to evacuate, I'd need more gas soon. It occurred to me that if I left the city altogether, I'd be abandoning the small group that had trusted me to come back. My mind went back to that building, the elevator, the locked rooftop door, the half-finished floor. I realized we'd made it out of the Golden Oasis only by supporting each other. Could I really drive off alone, leaving them behind? I decided I'd at least try to find a workable route, then return for them. That led me to the outskirts near Boulder Highway, an older corridor lined with motels, auto shops, and fast food places. A few of those businesses were shut. Windows were boarded or gates pulled down. The roads had scattered vehicles, but less so than downtown. I spotted a defunct gas station with a rusting canopy. The pumps had old plastic covers, probably out of operation. Approaching an intersection near an old auto body shop, I checked the side mirrors. Nothing behind me. I coasted to a stop in front of the shop's metal gate. The sign read, Val's Auto Works, and it looked as if it hadn't seen a customer in days. Next door was a small grocery store with a broken front window. The entire scene was too quiet. Suddenly, from the direction I'd come, an ominous wailing sound broke the stillness. It wasn't a siren, more like a sustained cry. I couldn't pinpoint who or what made the noise, but it unsettled me enough to realize time was short. I revved the engine, turning back in the direction of the Golden Oasis. Navigating side streets, I saw small gatherings of people in a park, some clutching supplies. At a four-way stop, a pickup truck swerved around me, nearly tipping over. The driver never even looked in my direction. Everyone was in their own frantic reality. Billboards overhead displayed glitching emergency messages. State of caution, limit travel, obey official instructions. When I finally reached the meeting spot, I found Kevin, Anderson, and Rosalind crouched behind a group of dumpsters in the alley, watching passers-by. Kevin seemed relieved when he saw me roll in. I signaled quietly, guiding the bike behind cover. Rosalind hurried over, asking about the highways. I explained the blocked ramps and the overwhelming presence of the National Guard. She hung her head, absorbing the bad news. Kevin proposed we try for the southwestern outskirts of the city, maybe find a back road leading toward Pahrump or the less traveled areas near Red Rock Canyon. It would be a long shot, and we had only one bike. But Kevin remembered that the Golden Oasis parking structure sometimes housed staff vehicles in a special locked section. If we could find his personal car, he drove a used SUV. Maybe that would serve as group transport. The idea was risky, but we saw no better alternative. We decided to circle back toward the Golden Oasis, re-enter the parking area from another entrance if possible. Then we'd retrieve Kevin's SUV, provided it was still there. On the way, we stuck to lesser-known streets, avoiding big intersections. Kevin and I took the lead, me on the motorcycle, him on foot with Anderson and Rosalind close behind. At times, I'd idle the bike to avoid drawing attention. We saw more evidence that the crisis was deepening. Boarded shops, the occasional helicopter overhead, and groups of strangers sprinting with their belongings. Eventually, we approached the vicinity of the Golden Oasis. From a corner vantage, we glimpsed the building's facade. A few windows were shattered, the sign flickered. A cluster of individuals stood near the front, though it was hard to determine their condition from our angle. The side street leading to the parking structure entrance was partially blocked by a crashed sedan. We snuck between parked cars and made our way to the secondary ramp entrance. A metal gate was closed, but not fully secured. Kevin tested it. It rattled open with some force. Once inside, it was obvious the structure was not deserted. More vehicles were left in disarray. Flickering emergency lights cast weird shadows. We stuck together, inching up the ramps until we reached the level where Kevin usually parked, level 3. There, in a row of staff-reserved slots, sat a black SUV. A big dent in the driver's side door suggested someone had bumped it recently, but it looked otherwise intact. Kevin rummaged for his keys, which had been clipped to his belt all along. The headlights flashed in response, which was an unexpected moment of reassurance. We wasted no time piling in. I parked the motorcycle next to it, just in case. But with only a quarter tank left, the bike wouldn't be our best long-distance option. Anderson jumped into the passenger seat. Rosalind and I slid into the back. Kevin turned the ignition, and the engine came to life. Then the reality of driving out of a potentially overrun city set in. We eased down the parking structure ramps, headlights off to avoid drawing attention. The sound of the engine echoed. At each turn we paused, scanning for movement. The lower levels were cast in near darkness, but no immediate obstacles appeared. Arriving at the exit, we saw that the same metal gate we'd ducked under earlier was now fully open. This gave us a clear path onto the side street. Pulling out, Kevin turned onto a deserted back road. For a moment, we glimpsed the brightening sky overhead, painted in orange as the sun rose further. The temperature was mild, but dryness scratched at the back of my throat, a subtle reminder we were in the Mojave Desert. Our plan was simple. Try to reach the southwestern outskirts, bypass the central chaos, and find a route out of the valley. Kevin mentioned possibly linking up with I-215 or smaller highways that connect to rural areas. Rosalind opened a navigation app. The data was spotty, but it showed some workable routes. We took a series of side roads, each one quieter than the last. Now and then, we spotted individuals who appeared disoriented, wandering near intersections. Some stared blankly or let out indistinct sounds. We avoided them, not wanting to risk any confrontation or infection, whatever that infection truly was. Within half an hour, we entered the outskirts of Henderson, passing suburban blocks with single-story homes and palm trees. Many of the roads were lined with parked cars, as if the owners had fled on foot. We tried to keep a low profile, but the SUV's engine announced our presence wherever we went. Eventually, we found ourselves near a large junction. A sign indicated we were close to Horizon Ridge Parkway. I recognized it from occasional side jobs I'd done in the area. It led further south and could connect to I-515 near the edges of Boulder City, or we could veer west. Anderson suggested we aim west, hoping to get around the city entirely. Traffic signals flashed yellow at an empty intersection. A few crows circled overhead. We turned onto a connecting road that angled upward, heading toward the desert slopes on the horizon. The city receded behind us, replaced by brush and rocky outcroppings. For the first time that day, we felt a sense of relief. No immediate signs of chaos. The open desert, while harsh, offered a break from the claustrophobia of downtown. We followed the winding road. The SUV's fuel gauge was around half, hopefully enough to reach a safer location. Kevin occasionally slowed, scanning the area. Rosalind tried radio stations on the car's receiver, picking up only intermittent emergency broadcasts. They repeated instructions to shelter indoors, recommended not to approach infected individuals, and advised that the National Guard had set up staging areas in multiple places around the valley. After another 20 minutes of winding roads, we came across an unmarked dirt path branching off to the right. Kevin parked near it, stepping out to inspect. Anderson and I checked a dusty signpost. It wasn't well maintained, but it hinted this path might lead to a county service road. eventually reconnecting to a highway that went around the city. We decided to take the risk. Driving on a dirt trail in an SUV wasn't ideal, but it might keep us clear of major trouble. Dust kicked up behind us as we slowly proceeded. The land on either side stretched into gentle hills dotted with small cacti. Power lines occasionally crossed overhead. That's when we noticed an older pickup truck parked at a strange angle ahead, as if someone had abandoned it. Kevin eased the SUV to a stop. We scanned the scene carefully. No immediate motion. There was a battered sign next to the truck advertising scenic tours to the Hoover Dam. Oddly out of place on this side road. Roslyn wondered if the driver had left to seek help. We inched around it. At that moment, something caught my eye. A figure near the edge of the brush. They wore dusty clothes and stared in our direction. The person took a few slow steps, then paused, as if trying to decide whether to approach. We didn't linger. Kevin pressed the accelerator, and the SUV bumped along the trail until the figure disappeared from view behind a ridge. Ahead, the path narrowed, cutting through the terrain. Another sign indicated we were close to some utility sheds. A few minutes later, the path opened onto a broader gravel road. According to the map on Roslyn's phone, this route could connect us to US 95 if we continued about 3 miles west. That would be our chance to circle around the main congestion. We pressed on, eventually spotting the highway in the distance, an asphalt ribbon cutting through the desert. The hum of big rigs or vehicles was conspicuously absent. Upon reaching the highway shoulder, Kevin guided us northbound. We saw a few other cars spaced far apart, each presumably with its own group of uncertain travelers. The day was growing warm under the desert sun. The events of the previous hours felt like a fever dream. Only the radio chatter and the occasional glimpses of worried drivers reminded us that the city behind us was in crisis. We traveled for miles, passing exit signs for places like Sloan, Jean, and eventually looping around toward the area south of the Strip. Our plan was to skirt around, possibly re-enter the city from a different angle if needed, or keep going if we believed it was safer outside. But the more we listened to the sporadic broadcasts, the more we realized the city might not be safe for some time. After an hour on the highway, we saw a rest stop. Kevin pulled in, noticing a few cars parked near the visitor center, which had public restrooms and vending machines. The group agreed to pause, gather ourselves, and figure out next steps. We were short on food, and the SUV's fuel gauge had dipped below a quarter. The rest stop was eerily quiet. 2 vehicles were parked near the building, but we saw no one outside. Anderson approached the vending machine, finding it powered and still functional. He purchased bottles of water and some packaged snacks. The small group regrouped by the SUV. We weighed our options. One idea was to continue further out, toward smaller towns, or even try crossing state lines if the roads were open. Another possibility involved returning to help others, but that seemed dangerous without better resources. We had no guarantee of safety if we went back into the thick of the outbreak. In the midst of this grim conversation, I remembered the slip of paper still zippered in my jacket pocket. $250,000. That sum could change a person's life, assuming currency and normalcy still mattered. Anderson gave me a knowing look, as if acknowledging the bittersweet irony of that windfall during a citywide emergency. We ended up deciding to keep driving south, see if we could locate a more rural route or a smaller community with resources. With luck, we might find a functioning gas station. So we piled back into Kevin's SUV. Roslyn took the wheel this time, giving Kevin a break. She navigated from the rest stop back onto the highway, heading further from the city. As we merged, we spotted one more sign that hammered home the scale of the emergency. An electronic board flashed. Avoid Las Vegas. Major incident. Follow official orders. That was all it said, repeating every few seconds. The sky was bright by then, with the midday sun climbing higher. We drove for what felt like another hour, maybe more, passing scattered signs for minor exits. The scenery was mostly scrub and desert rock, with the occasional cluster of trailers or a dusty side road. We had no illusions that we'd outrun every danger. Something about the events in the city suggested it might only be a matter of time before the crisis spread further. But in that moment, being away from the dense population center felt like the wisest choice. Finally, the fuel gauge hit a critical level. We needed gas soon, or we'd be stranded on the open highway. Rosalind spotted an exit with a sign indicating a small service station about 2 miles down a secondary road. She took it, and we soon found ourselves in a quiet place with a single pump, an old general store, and a sign reading, "Last stop for 60 miles." The store's windows were intact, though the open sign was off. Kevin parked, and we surveyed the station. No obvious signs of life, but also no sign of damage. With caution, we stepped out. The station's pump looked functional, though a small note read, "Inside prepay only." Anderson jiggled the handle. No fuel came out. We approached the store entrance. The wooden door was locked. A ring of keys hung on a peg just inside, visible through the glass. Rosalind tapped on the door, calling out. No answer. We circled around back, finding a small side window that was cracked open. After a brief discussion, we decided to carefully enter, all the while aware we could be trespassing. Under normal conditions, this would be a major concern, but the times were far from normal. Kevin slid the window open, and Anderson hoisted himself inside. A moment later, he unlocked the front door from within. We stepped inside to find a cramped interior with shelves of canned goods, bottled drinks, and some camping supplies. The register was unmanned. A faint smell of dust lingered. Carefully exploring the small back room, we discovered a desk with a ledger, presumably tracking sales, and a set of keys matching the ones we saw. Anderson found a slip of paper pinned next to them, possibly a note from the owner. It mentioned needing to evacuate due to city problems, and urged any traveler who found this place to be respectful. Attached was a phone number with no guarantee it worked. We realized the station might still have a working pump if we activated it from inside. Kevin located a switch labeled pump power, flipping it on. Outside, we heard a faint hum. We tested the pump. Sure enough, gasoline began to flow. We filled the SUV's tank, plus a couple of spare canisters found on a store shelf. In a more civilized time, we would have set money on the counter, and perhaps we did leave some cash behind. The memory is fuzzy, but I recall rummaging my wallet for the last of my bills and placing them near the register with a note that read, "Thank you, we will repay you." The group then gathered what supplies we could: water, energy bars, a few basic first aid items. Before leaving, we took a final look around. A single photograph behind the counter showed a smiling older couple, presumably the owners, standing in front of this station. We hoped they'd found safety. Stepping outside, the heat was noticeable. The sun glared, making the SUV's metal surfaces warm to the touch. We loaded everything, started the engine, and rejoined the road leading back to the highway. The plan was to follow US 95 or the next available route that headed further away from the congested zones. We still had no long-term solution, but at least we wouldn't be stranded. The day wore on as we traveled. Occasionally we tuned into AM stations. We caught bits of official announcements confirming that Las Vegas was under some sort of lockdown, with the National Guard requesting civilians remain in place. Reports indicated individuals were falling ill with symptoms that involved confusion, disorientation, and aggressive behavior. The cause was unknown. Some speculated a mutated pathogen, others mentioned water contamination theories. The broadcast ended with warnings to avoid contact with anyone who showed these symptoms. All the while, I kept thinking about the significance of that slip of paper in my pocket. $250,000. In my old life, that would have been a dream come true, a ticket out of debt, maybe a chance to start fresh. Now it felt more like a relic of the world I'd left behind. If we ever got back to normal, it might be honored. Or maybe currency would be the least of our worries. We eventually found a service road that looped us around the southern edge of the city, crossing near Sloan and Jean, then swinging back toward the direction of Red Rock Canyon. We saw the mountains in the distance, their red-hued rock formations shimmering. The highway out there was emptier, though a few vehicles occasionally sped past. One of them, a pickup truck, honked at us. The driver stuck an arm out, gesturing frantically for us to pull over. We hesitated, unsure of whether this was safe. Kevin decided to keep driving. We weren't in a position to provide help to strangers, not knowing if they were healthy or not. Everyone was on edge. The truck eventually slowed, falling behind us. A short while later, we neared the outskirts of a town that was little more than a cluster of houses. No official name was posted, just a sign for a local ranch. Realizing we needed a longer-term plan, we parked on a side street to discuss our next steps. We had enough gas for a few hundred more miles, but nowhere in mind to go. We concluded that staying mobile might be our best option for now. The city behind us was in disarray, and official instructions were contradictory. Some said to shelter in place. Others called for immediate evacuation. The group decided to aim for the direction of Pahrump, a town about an hour west of Vegas, known for being more remote, with some farmland. If the outbreak was city-centered, maybe that area would be safer. Kevin started the SUV again, and we continued onto Blue Diamond Road, heading toward the pass that leads into the next valley. It's a scenic route under normal circumstances, with desert vistas and glimpses of mountainous terrain. Now it felt like we were traveling through a silent expanse of uncertainty. During that drive, we traded stories about our lives before this crisis. Anderson revealed he was 26, a college dropout who came to Vegas to chase tips in the hospitality industry. Rosalind talked about her family in California, worried about whether they knew what was happening. Kevin admitted he'd worked security for 8 years, trying to save money to start his own business. As for me, I confessed the big news, how I hit a massive jackpot minutes before the Golden Oasis turned into a place of distress. They reacted with stunned surprise, then offered subdued congratulations, acknowledging the odd timing. Night began to fall as we neared the entrance to Pahrump. The lights of the small city twinkled below the mountains. Traffic was minimal. We passed a handful of gas stations, some open, some dark. The phone networks in the area were weak, making it tough to get real-time updates. We decided we'd find a motel or safe spot for the evening, reassess in daylight. We eventually spotted a small roadside motel with a vacancy sign flickering. The parking lot had a few cars, but it wasn't packed. We pulled in. The lobby was illuminated by a single desk lamp. A middle-aged woman stood behind the counter, looking as if she'd been dealing with a lot of frantic customers. Kevin spoke with her briefly, explaining we needed a couple of rooms. She mentioned hearing about issues in Las Vegas, but hadn't seen anything like it locally yet. We learned from her that many travelers came through, some in a hurry to get further north or west. She told us that the local news was cautioning residents to stay calm, and that a small sheriff's department was on alert for any sign of the illness. We secured 2 adjacent rooms with the last of our collected cash. The woman slid a piece of paper across the counter with emergency contact numbers for the local police station, medical center, and so on. We thanked her, noticing the tension in her eyes. She probably wondered if we were carrying the infection. But we all seemed well enough, so she let us in. That night I sat in the cramped motel room, gazing at the slip of paper from the Golden Oasis once again. $250,000 in bold type. The rest of the group tried to rest, though we set up a rotation to remain alert, given the day's events. Through the thin walls, I heard the gentle hum of the air conditioner. Outside, the desert breeze rustled a palm tree. It was oddly calm, considering the city we'd left behind had likely descended into further turmoil. The next morning, a local radio station had updated news. Las Vegas was under a strict perimeter watch by state authorities and the National Guard. The broadcast reported that the infection caused severe confusion and heightened aggression in those afflicted, urging any unaffected persons to stay away from large gatherings. Pahrump itself was still unaffected, though the community was preparing for a possible influx of evacuees. We discussed going further west, maybe to Beatty or Tonopah, or heading toward California, but that would mean crossing more desert. Our vehicle could handle it, but we were uncertain if resources or safe havens existed out there. Some folks in the motel lounge spoke of heading north to rural Nevada towns that might remain untouched. In the end, we decided to remain in Pahrump for a short while. The group located a local grocery store to stock up on supplies. We used some leftover funds plus any items we had of trade value. We connected briefly with a local volunteer group that was organizing a small safety net for travelers. Over the following days, communication about the crisis trickled in. Some areas of Las Vegas were being quarantined, others evacuated. The infection's cause was still under investigation. The rumor mill ran wild. Some claimed water contamination, others said it was airborne. None of the official channels confirmed the speculation. Meanwhile, images on social media showed once bustling casinos either locked down or deserted. In that small desert town, we found a semblance of temporary calm. The group stuck together, forming an odd camaraderie. Sometimes I'd catch Anderson looking at me, and we'd share a half smile. Maybe he was reflecting on the surreal way we met, him handing me that jackpot slip in a rush. Kevin eventually made contact with a relative in northern Nevada, who offered a place to stay. Rosalind wanted to check on her family in California. We decided that after a week of relative calm, we'd split up, each following our own path in search of some semblance of future. Before that, though, we compiled everything we'd learned. We made sure each person had what they needed: maps, water, phone numbers. On the evening we prepared to go our separate ways, I found myself sitting on the back steps of the motel, staring at the horizon. The desert sky was brilliant with stars, unobscured by city lights. The slip of paper felt heavier in my hand than any object I'd ever held. I remembered the moment of that jackpot, the beep and clang of the slot machine, the improbable alignment of symbols. It was as if fate played a cruel trick, bestowing a fortune right as the world cracked open. Still, I refused to discard it. Maybe I'd find a way back to that casino someday. Maybe the owners or the insurance or some official claim process would be revived in the aftermath, and I could redeem the life-altering sum. Or perhaps it would remain a memento of a life that almost was. Something about holding on to it felt vital, as though I needed a reminder that there was still hope for a return to normalcy. The next morning, Kevin loaded supplies into the SUV. Anderson planned to ride with him for a while, heading north, while Rosalind took a bus west, one of the last running lines, the schedule uncertain at best. She wanted to reach California and see her relatives. As for me, I wasn't sure if I'd remain in Pahrump or continue traveling. Kevin offered me a ride part of the way, but I declined. I had an odd desire to stay put for a time, gather more information, and see if there was any channel to reclaim a piece of my old life back in Vegas. We exchanged contact info, uncertain if phone networks would remain reliable. A series of quick handshakes and subdued well wishes followed. Then, in a swirl of dust, the SUV pulled out of the motel lot. Rosalind left shortly after, suitcase in hand, heading for the bus stop on the outskirts of town. I was alone in a place I never planned to be, with only a carry-on bag of clothes, a small stash of food, and that piece of paper. Each day that passed, I monitored the radio, checking for signs that the city might stabilize. Reports came in waves. Some said the infection was still spreading. Others claimed the National Guard had contained it within certain boundaries. The official statements remained cautious, sometimes contradictory. A week later, I learned that certain designated safe zones inside the greater Las Vegas area were being established, allowing some displaced residents to return under strict guidelines. I considered venturing back, though the risk felt high. Still, the idea of securing that jackpot pressed on my thoughts. Maybe it was foolish, but it symbolized a chance to step out of the spiral my life had been in. Over time, the infection became better documented. Researchers pinned down that it primarily spread through close contact with symptomatic individuals, though details were scarce. The city endured rolling power outages, disruptions to basic services. Tales of heroic rescues and dire episodes circulated in the news. But eventually, rumors of an organized containment effort suggested a fragile calm might be returning to parts of the valley. I found a rideshare driver in Pahrump, an older man with a battered sedan, who was making short trips to the edges of Las Vegas for a price. He was aware of the situation but said if there was a safe route, he'd take it. After some haggling, in which I promised to help pay for gas and bring extra water, he agreed to drop me near Henderson. From there, I'd rely on my own luck to proceed. That drive back was surreal. We crested the pass near Red Rock Canyon, seeing the city spread out below. Clouds of haze and pockets of intact neighborhoods blended in a bizarre tableau. Many areas were still off-limits, patrolled by guard checkpoints. The driver let me out near a secondary road on the Henderson border, cautioning me not to go further if I valued my safety. I thanked him, hoisted my small bag, and walked toward an abandoned commercial area. Eventually, I found a local official stationed near a barricade. I approached carefully, explaining I was a former resident just trying to see if I could retrieve some belongings. I decided not to mention the jackpot ticket, suspecting it would sound trivial or insane under the circumstances. After some back and forth, I was directed to a processing center where newly arrived individuals were screened. The lines were moderate, composed of returning residents, some volunteers, and a handful of outsiders. I stood there under the desert sun, waiting my turn. When I finally met with a uniformed official, I gave them my ID and relevant details. They asked if I'd had any contact with the infection. I explained I'd left the city early on, had no symptoms, and had mostly been in Pahrump. They recorded my data and told me I'd be allowed into certain zones. That's where the story becomes a long, winding process of checkpoints, limited mobility, and the slow re-establishment of certain civic functions. I navigated the partial reopening of some banks and city offices, each dealing with new protocols. The region around Fremont Street had a high security presence, restricting who could enter. The Golden Oasis itself was sealed off, a battered monument to the earlier chaos. I attempted to contact the management of the Golden Oasis, or at least an entity that might represent them, explaining I held a winning jackpot ticket. I ended up speaking with various insurance adjusters, hearing different versions of, "We can't help you right now." I didn't blame them. The entire system was overwhelmed. Months later, when the city began a slow recovery, I stayed persistent. I filed claims, submitted documents, gave statements about the date and time of the jackpot. It was a bureaucratic maze, but I refused to give up. In the process, I discovered that the Golden Oasis was purchased by another company and was undergoing renovations to open under a new name. My journey didn't conclude in a sudden triumph, nor in abject failure. Rather, it became a testament to how tenuous life can be when everything falls apart, and how random fortune can still matter if you grasp it tightly enough. I remain in Las Vegas as the city recovers. I found another maintenance job, ironically at a different property on the Strip that reopened sooner. Every day, I check the progress of my claim. I keep that slip of paper in a sealed folder, each crease carefully preserved. I think back to Kevin, Anderson, and Roslyn. We exchanged a few messages in the weeks following our separation, but communications became spotty. The last I heard, Kevin was living near Reno, helping with relief efforts. Anderson might have gone back to his hometown, though I'm not sure which state that was. Roslyn apparently reached her relatives in California safely, at least for the time being. As for me, I'm still standing. The city I call home carries a new set of scars, and so do I. You might wonder if I ever regret not skipping town entirely. Perhaps if I had, I'd be somewhere else, living simpler. But deep down, I hold on to the hope that someday I'll walk into a freshly reopened office, maybe an official gaming regulator or a re-established branch of the Golden Oasis, and place that ticket on a desk. Maybe the teller will scan it, see the numbers and say, "Sir, we've been waiting for you." It might sound naive, but it's the glimmer of possibility I cling to. It's what keeps me going in a world that shifted sideways that night on Fremont Street. And if it doesn't happen, I'll still have the memory of how close I came to changing my life, right before everything changed for everyone. So, that's my account. I can't promise it's free of gaps or confusion, because sometimes I still struggle to piece it all together. The events unraveled so quickly, but if you're reading this or hearing about it, I hope you understand the choices I made and the strange luck I had. I hit a big win in a Las Vegas casino at the worst possible moment. And I survived by following a bellhop with a keycard, trusting new friends in a parking structure, and riding into the desert on a half-fueled motorcycle. The sum total was a journey through chaos that tested everything I thought I knew about myself and this city. Now the neon lights are slowly returning, and so is the hum of life along Las Vegas Boulevard. Nightly water shows and marquee billboards flicker back to life, albeit with caution signs and reminders about new regulations. The horizon is changed in ways I can't fully describe. But we go on. That's the nature of this place. And every once in a while, I slip my hand into my pocket, feel that well-worn paper still hidden away. It's a quiet reminder that luck can strike at any time, good or bad. It reminds me that no matter how dire the circumstances, there's always a chance that the real might line up once again. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps my channel alive. Until next time, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and trust nothing, not even the silence.